Daniel Morales had always loved the quiet of the outdoors. Ever since he was a child, he felt more at home in forests and open fields than in crowded cities with loud traffic and endless voices. As he grew older, this love turned into his work. He became a wildlife photographer, traveling across different national parks and remote natural areas, hoping to capture rare moments with birds and animals most people never saw in their lifetime. One early winter morning, Daniel drove deep into the mountains of Arizona. The air was cool and crisp, and the sky was a soft gray that promised a peaceful day. He had received a report that a rare golden eagle had been seen in the area. For Daniel, seeing that eagle would be a dream come true. He parked his Jeep near a small dirt path and grabbed his backpack, camera, and binoculars, ready for a long hike. The day began calmly. The trees stood tall and quiet, their branches lightly dusted with frost. The air smelled fresh, and the ground crunched softly under Daniel's boots. Every now and then, he stopped to take pictures of small animals, rabbits hopping across the path, tiny birds pecking at frozen berries, and the soft shapes of deer moving in the distance. Everything felt peaceful, almost too peaceful, as if the mountains were holding their breath. But as the hours passed, the sky began to change. The gentle gray thickened into heavy clouds, darker and colder than before. A faint wind brushed across Daniel's face, carrying a sting that warned him something was coming. Still, he continued walking, telling himself it was only a passing cloud. When the first snowflake fell on his jacket sleeve, he didn't worry. Snow was common in winter. But soon, that one snowflake became many, then hundreds, then thousands. The wind grew stronger and colder, pushing against him. He tried checking the weather on his phone, but there was no signal. The mountains were known for that. You could walk only a short distance and lose connection completely. Within another hour, the peaceful mountain had turned into a swirling white world. Snow fell so fast that Daniel could barely see the trees he had walked past only minutes earlier. The wind howled through the branches, and the temperature dropped sharply. The calm morning was gone, replaced by a dangerous storm. Daniel realized he needed to head back to his Jeep immediately. He turned around and started walking quickly, trying to follow the path he had taken. But the snow had covered everything. The ground was white. The trees were white. And the trail he had walked on had vanished under layers of new snow. It was like the forest had erased his steps. He tried not to panic. He had trained for situations like this. He told himself to stay calm and keep moving. If he could find the main trail, or a familiar rock or tree, he could make his way back. But the storm only grew worse. The wind pushed against him like a strong hand, and the cold bit through his jacket and gloves. His fingers began to feel stiff, and every breath he took felt like cold smoke. Minutes stretched into an hour. Daniel's steps slowed. The snow was deep, and every movement took energy he didn't have. He felt cold creeping into his arms and legs, and he knew that this was dangerous. Cold weather could be unforgiving. He needed warmth, shelter, anything to help him survive the storm. He spotted a fallen tree with a hollow space beneath it, and quickly crawled inside, hoping it would give him at least a bit of protection from the wind. It helped, but not enough. The inside was cold and damp. His jacket was wet from the snow, and his hands were shaking. He rubbed them together, breathed warm air into them, and hugged himself tightly. But the cold would not leave. He tried to think clearly. What should he do? Wait inside the hollow until the snow stopped? Try to walk again and hope he found the right direction? He felt the weight of fear settle in his chest, but he did not want to give up. He told himself he just needed a short rest before trying again. But the storm didn't slow down. Snow piled up outside the tree, and wind whistled through the branches. The forest that had once seemed calm and friendly now felt completely different. Wild, powerful, and uncaring. It was a reminder that nature was beautiful but also unpredictable. As Daniel sat curled under the tree, trying to stay awake, he heard a soft crunching sound in the snow. His heart jumped. Was it an animal? A deer? A coyote? Something else? The sound grew closer, slow and steady, like careful footsteps. Daniel pushed himself slightly forward to look out, and through the thick curtain of snow, he saw a figure moving toward him. At first, it was only a shadow, and he blinked to make sure he wasn't seeing things. But slowly, the figure became clearer. It was a person, a woman, wrapped in warm winter clothing, her long dark braids swinging as she walked. She moved with steady confidence, as if the storm didn't frighten her at all. She stopped a few feet away from him and crouched down to look into the hollow where he was hiding. Her eyes were sharp but calm, and her expression showed more concern than fear. "You shouldn't stay there," she said, her voice firm but not unkind. "It's too cold. You won't last long." Daniel tried to speak, but his lips were stiff and his voice came out shaky. I got lost. I was trying to get back to my jeep." The woman nodded. "This storm came earlier than expected. Many people in these mountains get caught by surprise." She extended her hand toward him. "My name is Nayeli. I live not far from here. I can help you. But we need to go now." Daniel looked at her hand. It felt like the most hopeful thing he had seen all day. He reached out and grabbed it, letting her pull him to his feet. As soon as he stood, the cold wind hit him again, and he swayed slightly. Nayeli steadied him. "Follow me," she said. "Stay close. The snow is deep, but I know the way." Daniel didn't argue. He didn't have the strength to. He followed her through the swirling white storm, trusting her completely. Nayeli walked ahead with sure steps, stopping every few minutes to check if he was still behind her. She guided him between tall pine trees, across small slopes, and around large rocks, moving as if she had memorized every corner of the mountain. Time blurred. Daniel's feet were numb, and he could hardly feel his fingers, but he kept going because Nayeli kept going. Her presence was like a small flame, leading him through darkness. After what felt like forever, he finally saw something through the snow, a small wooden cabin, half hidden between trees, its roof covered in white. Nayeli pointed to it. "We made it. Come inside." Daniel followed her to the cabin door, his legs weak but moving. Inside, the cabin was simple but warm compared to the outdoors. A small fireplace sat in one corner, cold but ready to be lit. There was a wooden table, a couple of chairs, shelves with jars of herbs and food, and a single bed layered with thick blankets. "Sit near the wall," Nayeli said as she shut the door against the cold. "I'll start a fire. You need warmth right away." Daniel sank to the floor, breathing hard, feeling the warmth of the cabin slowly reach his frozen skin. Nayeli moved quickly and skillfully, placing wood in the fireplace and lighting it with practiced ease. Soon, the soft glow of fire filled the room. "You're lucky I found you," she said gently. "These mountains can be beautiful, but winter doesn't forgive mistakes." Daniel nodded weakly, watching the flames dance. He knew she was right, and he knew something else too. Without Nayeli, he might not have survived the night. Nayeli moved around the small cabin with calm confidence, as if she had walked the same steps 1,000 times before. The fire slowly grew brighter, filling the room with a gentle orange glow. Daniel watched her with tired eyes, grateful but still slightly overwhelmed. The storm outside roared against the walls. But inside, for the first time in hours, he felt a hint of safety. His clothes were wet from the snow, and his hands were still shaking from the cold. Nayeli noticed it immediately. "You should take off that jacket," she said softly. "It's soaked. Cold water steals body heat." "I'll give you a blanket." Daniel nodded, though even lifting his arms felt like lifting stones. His fingers were stiff and clumsy, but he slowly unzipped his jacket and laid it on the floor near the fire to dry. Nayeli took a thick wool blanket from a shelf and wrapped it around his shoulders with gentle care. "Thank you," he said, his voice still weak. "You're welcome," she replied. "Anyone would do the same." She handed him a wooden cup of warm water. He held it close, letting the steam warm his face. His body, still recovering from the cold outside, slowly relaxed. The fire snapped softly, filling the silence with a peaceful sound. After a moment, Nayeli crouched near him. "Are you feeling better?" "A little," Daniel said, taking a small sip. "My hands still feel numb." "That will pass," she replied. "We'll warm you slowly. It's important not to heat up too fast." Daniel took another sip, the warm water easing the tightness in his chest. He looked around the cabin. It was simple, but everything inside had a purpose. The wooden shelves were filled with herbs, dried plants, and jars of food. The walls had woven decorations, and the air carried a soft scent of pine and something earthy he couldn't place. The place felt lived in, cared for, and deeply connected to the land outside. Nayeli sat down on a small chair near the fire, checking some herbs on the table. "The mountain brought this storm early," she said. "Even the weather service didn't expect it to hit so hard today." Daniel nodded slowly. "I should have turned back earlier, but I didn't want to miss the chance to photograph the eagle." Nayeli looked up, her eyes calm but knowing. "The golden eagle?" "Yes," he said. "I've been trying to capture one in flight for months." She smiled gently. "They live high in these mountains. My people have known them for generations. They're strong birds, independent. They don't often appear to strangers." Daniel listened carefully, fascinated. He had always loved animals, but hearing someone speak about them with such understanding felt different. "You said you live nearby?" he asked. "Yes," she replied. "My family lives down by the reservation lands. This cabin belongs to my grandparents. They used it when they watched the mountains during winter season. We keep it in good condition for times like this." "So you're used to storms like this?" "Yes," she said with a small nod. "I grew up learning how to travel safely in the mountains. My parents taught me how to follow trails even when they're hidden by snow. They also taught me how to help anyone who needs it." Daniel felt a wave of admiration for her. She moved with such certainty and calmness, qualities he wished he had at the moment. "I'm really grateful you found me," he said. "You would have found shelter eventually," she replied kindly. "But I'm glad I reached you before the cold grew worse." There was no pride in her voice, only sincerity. The way she spoke made Daniel feel at ease, like he was speaking to someone who understood both the mountains and people with equal depth. Another rush of wind hit the cabin walls, and the structure creaked slightly. Daniel looked toward the window. Snow was piling up so fast that the glass was almost completely white. "How long do you think the storm will last?" he asked. "Hard to know," Nayeli said. "Sometimes storms quiet down after a few hours. Sometimes they stay through the night. But we're inside. And that's what matters." Daniel adjusted the blanket around his shoulders. "I was trying to make it back to my Jeep. It's probably buried in snow by now." "It might be," she agreed. "But we'll deal with that later. For now, you need warmth and rest." Daniel could not remember the last time someone had spoken to him with such calm reassurance. He felt strangely comforted, even though the storm outside sounded fierce. Nayeli reached for a pot and filled it with water from a large container. She set it near the fire to warm. "I'll make some herbal tea," she said. "It will help your body recover faster." "You know a lot about this," he said, watching her crush dried leaves between her fingers. "My grandmother taught me," she replied. "She said nature gives us everything we need. We just have to learn how to listen." Daniel smiled a little. "That sounds wise." She was wise, Nayeli said softly, and very patient. The cabin felt warmer now. The smell of herbs slowly filled the air as the water heated. Daniel leaned his head back against the wooden wall, closing his eyes for a brief moment. He wasn't asleep, he was simply letting the warmth soak into him. Nayeli poured the hot tea into a cup and handed it to him. "Drink it slowly." He took a sip. The flavor was earthy, slightly sweet, and surprisingly comforting. "This is good," he said. "What's in it?" "A mix of mountain mint and willow bark," she answered. "Good for nerves and warmth." He nodded with appreciation. "It's helping already." As he drank, Nayeli sat down across from him. For a moment, they were both quiet, listening to the wind outside. "Do you come here often?" Daniel asked, trying to keep the conversation going. "Yes," she said. "I visit when I patrol the mountain trails. I work as a ranger on the reservation. That explains why you walk through the storm so easily, he said with a small laugh. She smiled lightly. I've walked through much worse. Daniel admired her strength. She seemed perfectly at home in a situation that would frighten many people. He wondered what experiences she had gone through to become so steady and sure. What were you doing out there before you found me? He asked gently. Checking the trails, she replied. Some hikers were supposed to return this morning. I came to make sure none of them got caught in the storm. So you were out looking for people? Yes, she said simply. It's part of the job, and part of the responsibility of living here. Daniel felt impressed. He had always thought of mountains as places of adventure, photography, and beauty. But for Nayeli, they were part of her life, her home, her duty. As the fire glowed brighter, Daniel felt warmth returning to his feet and hands. The blanket wrapped around him felt softer and heavier now, as if encouraging him to rest. Nayeli stood up and checked the window. Snow continued to fall, covering the glass in a moving white blur. It will be a long night, she said. Daniel nodded. I hope it slows down soon. It might, she replied. But even if it doesn't, now, we have everything we need here. The reassurance in her voice eased the tension Daniel didn't even realize he was carrying. Being lost in the storm had shaken him deeply. If Nayeli hadn't found him, he didn't want to think about what might have happened. He watched her move around the cabin again, checking the fire, adjusting the wood, preparing a small bowl of warm soup. Every movement she made was thoughtful and calm. She wasn't rushing. But she wasn't wasting a second either. You really know what you're doing, he said quietly. I've had years of practice, she replied with a gentle smile. She handed him the bowl. He accepted it gratefully, letting the heat warm his fingers. Eat slowly, she reminded him. He nodded and took a spoonful. The soup was simple but warm and comforting. Exactly what his body needed. Nayeli sat back down, watching him with soft concern. You're safe now, she said quietly. The storm may be strong, but it can't reach you in here. Daniel felt her words settle deep inside him. Safe. It was a feeling he hadn't had since the storm began. As the fire crackled gently and the storm continued to roar outside, Daniel realized something important. He wasn't just rescued. He was in the care of someone who understood the mountains and how to survive them better than anyone he had ever met. And this was only the beginning of the night. The storm outside grew louder as evening turned into night. Snow pushed hard against the walls, and the wind made a deep sound that seemed to come from the mountains themselves. Inside the cabin, the fire glowed softly, but even its warm light could not completely fight the freezing air that crept in through every small crack. Daniel pulled the blanket tighter around his shoulders, but he still felt a chill in his bones. It wasn't the kind of cold that simply made someone shiver. It was the slow, deep cold that stayed inside, no matter how close he sat to the fire. He could feel it in his fingers, in his arms, even near his chest. The storm had been harsh on him, and his body was still recovering. Nayeli noticed immediately. She had been checking a shelf of supplies when she glanced his way and saw the tremor in his hands. Quietly, she walked over and knelt beside him. You're still cold, she said gently. A little, Daniel admitted. I'm warming up, but slowly. She studied him carefully, her eyes filled with calm understanding. Your body lost a lot of heat outside. It will take hours to fully recover. Daniel nodded. But even that small movement made him feel slightly dizzy. The warmth from the fire helped, but it wasn't enough. The cabin wasn't very big, and the temperature outside was far below freezing. The fire only warmed a small area around it. The rest of the cabin remained extremely cold. Nayeli stood and checked the fire again, adding 2 more pieces of wood. The flames rose a little higher, but she knew it would not be enough to keep the whole cabin warm all night. She sighed softly, as if confirming something to herself. Daniel watched her, sensing she was thinking about something important. Is something wrong? Not wrong, she said, but we need to talk about something. Her voice was calm but serious. She sat down across from him and folded her hands. There is only one bed in this cabin, she began. I usually stay here alone, so one bed is enough. But tonight is different. The temperature will drop even more. The fire cannot heat the entire room. It will get very cold later. Daniel listened closely, not yet understanding what she meant. When the temperature drops too low, she continued, blankets and fire are not enough. Do you know what keeps people warm in storms like this? Daniel shook his head slowly. Body heat, she said. Shared warmth. She spoke in a steady, practical voice, without hesitation. If two people share the same bed and cover themselves together, they stay warm. If they sleep separately, the cold can cause dangerous problems. Daniel felt a rush of surprise, but not the kind that made someone uncomfortable, just unexpected. He knew she was speaking logically, from experience, with no hidden meaning in her words. So, you're saying, he began. Yes, Nayeli said before he could finish. I'm saying that if we don't sleep in the same bed, we will freeze tonight. Please don't resist the idea. It is simply what must be done to stay safe. Her voice held no embarrassment, no awkwardness, only honesty. It was pure survival advice, the same advice an experienced ranger would give to anyone stuck in such cold. Daniel swallowed gently. In his mind, he understood what she meant. In the mountains, survival often required uncommon choices. The cold didn't care about personal space or comfort. It simply took warmth away until nothing was left. He nodded slowly. I understand. Thank you for telling me. Nayeli smiled a little, relieved that he wasn't misunderstanding. Good. I didn't want you to be uncomfortable. But this is normal in situations like this. Even my parents taught us this when we were young. If someone is freezing, you don't leave them alone. Daniel looked at the small bed in the corner. It wasn't very big, but it was layered with thick blankets. In this weather, that bed was the warmest spot in the entire cabin. We won't sleep yet, Nayeli said. But later, when you start feeling weaker, I'll tell you when it's time. Daniel nodded again. To make the atmosphere lighter, Nayeli stood and brought him another cup of warm herbal tea. Drink this. It will help your body get ready to rest. He accepted it and wrapped his cold hands around the warm cup. The steam rose upward, brushing his face softly. As he drank the tea, his body slowly relaxed. Nayeli returned to the table, sorting through items in a small wooden box. This cabin was built by my grandparents, she said, beginning to share stories again. They spent many winters up here. They always said the mountains are teachers. What do they teach? Daniel asked, grateful for the conversation. They teach patience, she said gently, respect, and the importance of staying calm, even when things seem frightening. Daniel smiled softly. I guess I had a lesson today. You did, she said with a light laugh. But you handled it well. You kept moving even when it was difficult. Many people stop walking when they feel cold. And that is very dangerous. Her praise made Daniel sit a little straighter under the blanket. I was scared, he admitted. Being scared is not a weakness, Nayeli said. Fear keeps us alert. What matters is that you didn't give up. Daniel felt comforted by her words. She had a way of speaking that made everything clearer, simpler, less heavy. The storm continued outside, shaking the windows slightly. Snow piled against the doorway. Nayeli walked over and checked the door latch to make sure it was secure. How often do storms get this strong? Daniel asked. Maybe twice every winter, she replied. Sometimes they pass quickly. Other times they last all night. This one feels like an all-night storm. She came back and sat on the edge of the bed, testing the blanket. I'll add more blankets, she said. The more layers, the better. She didn't seem nervous or uncomfortable about the sleeping arrangement at all. To her, it was just a practical solution. Daniel watched her gather blankets from the shelf. She folded them neatly and placed them on the bed. It already looked warmer, like a safe place in the middle of the frozen world outside. The fire crackled again, sending sparks upward. Daniel finished his tea and placed the cup on the floor beside him. Nayeli looked at him thoughtfully. How are you feeling now? Still cold, he admitted honestly. Better than before, but still cold inside. That means your body is tired, she said. You'll need to rest very soon. She walked over and handed him another thick blanket. Wrap this around you until we go to bed. Start. Daniel did so, feeling grateful for her care. For a while, they sat quietly. The kind of quiet that didn't feel heavy or strange. It was a peaceful quiet, with the fire making soft sounds, and the glow filling the room with a calm orange light. After some minutes, Nayeli stood and stretched her arms. It's time, she said softly. You're shivering more now. You need real warmth. Daniel didn't argue. He knew she was right. She walked to the bed and lifted one corner of the blankets. You can take the left side, she said. I'll take the right. Just lie down and cover yourself well. Daniel walked slowly to the bed. His body felt heavy from the cold, but he managed to climb onto the mattress carefully. The blankets were warm and thick, and he felt some relief immediately. Nayeli lay down on the other side, leaving respectful space between them, and pulled the blankets over both of them. She adjusted the layers so that no cold air could slip through. We just stay still and let the warmth build, she explained. Just breathe normally. This is how mountain people survive cold nights. Daniel nodded, grateful that she kept everything calm and simple. As they settled under the blankets, he could feel the heat slowly gathering between them, not too close, not too far, just enough to share warmth safely. It wasn't uncomfortable. It felt natural, like sitting close to a campfire. Outside, the storm continued to rage, but inside, the bed felt like a small island of warmth in a sea of cold. Nayeli spoke softly, almost in a whisper. You're safe now. The cold won't reach us here. Daniel closed his eyes, and for the first time since the storm began, he believed her. The warmth slowly filled his body, melting away the deep chill that had settled in his bones. His breathing grew steadier, and the fear he had carried since getting lost finally faded. He didn't know how long the storm would last. He didn't know when they would be able to leave the cabin, but he knew one thing. He wouldn't face the cold alone. The warmth inside the blankets slowly grew stronger, forming a soft bubble of comfort around Daniel and Nayeli, even though the storm outside kept roaring like a giant breathing cold wind across the mountains. Inside the bed, the air felt gentler. The firelight still flickered, but it was far away now, because most of the heat they were sharing came from their closeness under the thick layers of blankets. Daniel lay on his side, careful to keep a respectful distance, but grateful for the warmth he could already feel spreading through his arms and legs. His body had been dangerously cold earlier, and it amazed him how quickly it responded to the shared heat. It felt like his muscles were finally relaxing after hours of being tight with fear and cold. Nayeli lay quietly on the other side, her breathing steady and calm. She had done this before, helped people survive cold nights. That was clear from the way she kept checking the edges of the blankets and adjusting them to make sure no cold air slipped in. She moved gently so Daniel wouldn't feel uneasy. For several minutes, neither of them spoke. The silence inside the cabin was different from the silence outside. Outside, the silence came from snow, covering everything. Inside, it came from two people resting after a long, exhausting day. Finally, Daniel whispered, "Thank you again. For everything. Finally. 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 Finally." Nayeli turned her head slightly, enough to look at him warmly. "You don't need to thank me. This is what anyone should do for someone in danger. But still," he said softly, "you saved me." Her eyes were kind. "The mountains tested you today. They test everyone. You made it because you didn't give up. I only helped guide you the last part of the way." He let her words sink in. She always spoke with a calm strength that made everything feel less frightening. Daniel felt safer than he had felt the entire day. A moment later, Nayeli asked, "Are you feeling warmer now?" "Yes," Daniel said. "Much warmer." I didn't think I could feel this warm again. She smiled. That's how shared warmth works. The body is stronger than people think. It just needs help sometimes. The storm made a deep rumbling sound outside, as if it were pushing against the mountains. Snow hit the window with soft thumps. Daniel listened for a while, then spoke again. Is it always this cold in winter? Sometimes colder, she replied. When I was a child, there was a winter where the snow piled up past the windows. My grandmother said it was one of the strongest winters she had seen. We stayed inside for days. How did you stay warm back then? Daniel asked curiously. She smiled at the memory. We all slept in the same room around the fire. My grandmother used to tell stories, and we would listen until we fell asleep. She always said stories brought warmth too, not only to the body, but to the heart. Daniel felt a gentle comfort in her words. Your grandmother sounds wise. She was, Nayeli said softly. She taught me everything I know about these mountains. She said the cold can be dangerous, but fear makes it worse. If you understand the cold, you can survive it. Daniel shifted slightly, making sure the blanket stayed tucked. You really learned a lot from her. I did, she said, and I try to pass it on. Helping you today, it reminded me of her. She always believed that the mountains bring people together in unexpected ways. And, Daniel thought about that. It did feel strange, yet meaningful, that he had crossed paths with Nayeli in such a difficult moment. If she hadn't come along when she did, he didn't finish the thought. Instead, he asked, Do you help a lot of people lost in storms? Not a lot, she answered. But sometimes hikers get confused or misjudge the weather. I always check the trails when winter storms are expected. If someone needs help, I guide them to safety. That must be stressful, Daniel said. It is, she admitted softly. But it's also important. These mountains are part of my home. I want people to respect them and stay safe. Daniel admired her dedication. She wasn't only someone who lived in the mountains, she protected them and the people who ventured into them. For a while, they both listened to the wind. The storm had not weakened. In fact, the gusts seemed even stronger. The cabin walls creaked gently, like an old ship on a wild sea. Daniel let out a slow breath. I didn't realize how quickly things could go wrong. One minute I was taking pictures. The next minute everything disappeared in the snow. That happens often, Nayeli said quietly. The mountains change fast. They don't warn you twice. Daniel felt a mix of humility and gratitude. I've traveled to many places for my photography, but I guess I wasn't prepared for the mountains in winter. Nayeli's voice softened. No one prepares perfectly. Not even people who live here. The mountains always have secrets. Daniel smiled a little. You talk about them like they're alive. In a way they are, she said calmly. They shape people. They test people. They remind us that nature is bigger than us, but also that it cares for us if we respect it. He looked at her with quiet admiration. She seemed to understand the world in a way he hadn't learned yet. After a moment, she asked gently, Are your fingers warm now? Daniel flexed them under the blanket. Yes. Much better. My whole body feels warmer. That's good, she said with a peaceful smile. Soon your strength will come back. They rested quietly again. The fire crackled softly, and the storm continued dancing against the cabin walls. Then, slowly, conversation began to flow more naturally. Like two people who had known each other long enough to trust each other. Daniel told her about his work, how he traveled to forests, deserts, jungles, and wetlands to capture rare moments with wildlife. He described the first camera he ever owned, a simple old one his father had given him. Nayeli listened with interest. You must have seen many beautiful things. I have, he said thoughtfully. But sometimes I forget to appreciate them. I'm always thinking about the next photo, the next trip. Life moves fast in that kind of work, she observed gently. But moments like this make you slow down. Daniel nodded. They do. Then Nayeli shared her own stories, how she trained as a ranger, how she loved guiding children on nature walks, and how she spent quiet evenings listening to the mountains. "I like the simplicity," she said softly. "Life feels clear up here," Daniel agreed. Something about the cabin, the storm, the quiet conversation, it all felt simple and meaningful. Hours passed slowly but peacefully. Eventually, Nayeli spoke again, her voice warm and soft. "You should try to sleep. Your body needs rest." "What about you?" Daniel asked. "I'll rest too," she said. "The blankets will stay warm. The fire will keep burning for a while." Daniel felt a wave of calm wash over him. "All right. Thank you." He closed his eyes, letting himself relax completely. Nayeli lay still beside him, giving him the space he needed while making sure the blankets stayed secure. Outside, the storm continued its wild dance. Inside, the warmth grew stronger, and Daniel finally felt safe enough to fall asleep. He drifted into a gentle rest, knowing that he was protected not just by the blankets and the fire, but by the quiet strength of the woman beside him, whose calm presence made the freezing night feel less frightening and much more human. And as Daniel slept, Nayeli watched the fire, listening to the storm, knowing that this night would become a story neither of them would ever forget. The first light of morning came slowly, like a soft whisper across the snow-covered mountains. After a long night of storm winds and freezing air, the world outside the cabin finally began to calm. The wind became weaker, the sky turned a pale gray, and everything was covered in a thick blanket of fresh snow that sparkled in the early light. Inside the cabin, the fire had burned low, leaving warm embers glowing softly. Daniel stirred under the blankets, feeling a gentle warmth around him. His body was still tired but no longer cold. The deep chill that had once settled in his bones had finally faded. For a few quiet moments, he didn't open his eyes. He just breathed slowly, appreciating the warmth, the safety, and the quiet of the morning. Then he heard a soft movement beside him. He opened his eyes. Nayeli was sitting up, wrapped in one of the blankets, watching the glowing embers. Her expression was peaceful, and there was a gentle calmness in her eyes. "You slept well," she said softly when she saw him awake. Daniel stretched a little, careful not to disturb the blankets. "I did. Better than I expected after a storm like that." "You needed it," she replied. "Your body worked hard yesterday." He sat up slowly, feeling grateful for how rested he felt. The cabin was cold again, but not nearly as cold as the night before. The blankets still held some warmth, and the fire embers glowed enough to give the room a soft light. Outside, the storm was finally quiet. No wind pushed against the cabin. No heavy snow drifted past the windows. The mountains seemed peaceful once again. Nayeli stood and walked to the fire pit. "I'll start the fire again. Morning air can be cold." Daniel watched her gather small pieces of wood and arrange them carefully. She worked with the same calm focus she always had, as though she understood fire as well as she understood the mountains. Soon, flames began to rise again, bringing new warmth into the room. "Thank you," Daniel said with a smile. "You've taken care of everything." She smiled back gently. "You're the guest here, and you needed help. That's what the cabin is for." Daniel wrapped a blanket around his shoulders and stood up slowly. His legs felt steady now. "It feels strange, waking up and knowing the storm is over." "That's how storms are," Nayeli said. "They come fast and strong. But afterward, the world becomes quiet again." He walked to the window and looked outside. The mountains looked like a painting, white, peaceful, untouched. Trees were heavy with snow, and the path leading to the cabin was buried under a thick white layer. "It's beautiful," Daniel said softly, almost in awe. "It is," she agreed, standing beside him. Winter mornings after a storm are some of the most beautiful moments. The mountains look new, like they were rebuilt during the night. Daniel breathed in deeply. The air in the cabin smelled like wood smoke and herbs. It felt comforting. Nayeli brought 2 cups of warm tea and handed one to him. "Drink slowly. The morning cold can make your body stiff." Daniel accepted the cup. The warmth felt good against his hands. "Thank you," he said again. "You thank me too much," she answered with a light laugh. It's all right. They both sat by the fire, sipping their tea. The warmth spread through them gently, and the soft crackle of the fire added a peaceful background sound. After a moment, Daniel spoke quietly. I keep thinking about yesterday. It feels unreal now. That's normal, Nayeli said. When people go through something difficult, the next day feels distant. Like a dream. But it wasn't a dream, Daniel said. I was truly lost, and you truly saved me. Nayeli looked at him with kind eyes. The mountains brought our paths together. That's all. Daniel shook his head gently. No. It was your strength, your experience, your kindness. I wouldn't be sitting here right now. She didn't argue. She only smiled softly, accepting his words quietly. After finishing their tea, Nayeli began preparing simple breakfast, warm bread, and dried fruit. Daniel helped her, wanting to contribute at least a little after everything she had done for him. While they ate, Nayeli said, When the sun gets higher, we'll be able to leave the cabin. The snow will be deep, but we can walk slowly. I'll guide you back to the road. Daniel nodded. I'll follow you. I trust your direction much more than mine. She laughed gently at that. Good. It is safer that way. Once breakfast was done, they packed the blankets, cleaned the small table, and put fresh logs on the fire so it would keep burning until they left. Nayeli checked her backpack, making sure she had everything needed for the walk ahead. Then she turned to Daniel. Are you ready? He took a deep breath and nodded. Yes. Let's go. They stepped outside together. The cold air touched his face, but it was nothing like the storm's freezing wind. The sky was clearer now, and the morning sun made the snow shine. Everything looked calm, quiet, fresh. Nayeli walked ahead, leaving careful footprints in the deep snow. Daniel followed closely. The world around them was unbelievably peaceful. Snow muffled every sound, making the mountains feel like they were holding their breath. As they walked, Daniel said, I don't think I'll ever forget this place. Nayeli glanced back at him. The mountains have a way of staying in people's memories. They will stay in mine, he said softly. Especially because of you. She didn't answer right away. She kept walking, her pace steady and sure. Then she said gently, Sometimes life brings people together for a short time, but even short moments can mean something. Daniel knew she was right. They might only know each other for one night and one morning, but the impact of that time felt far greater. After a long walk, they finally reached the edge of the reservation trail where her jeep was parked. Snow covered most of it, but the shape was visible under the white layer. Nayeli brushed snow off the door and looked at him. I'll drive you back to your car. I think it'll start if we clear the snow. Daniel nodded, smiling. I'd appreciate that. The drive was slow but peaceful. White landscapes passed by the windows, and Daniel watched them quietly, feeling grateful for just being alive to see the morning light. When they reached his jeep, they worked together to clear the snow from the windshield. Daniel tried turning the key. The engine struggled, then started. He let out a relieved breath. Looks like it survived the storm too. Nayeli smiled. Good. Now you can go home safely. Daniel stood still for a moment, unsure how to express everything he felt. Gratitude. Respect. A strange sense of connection. Thank you for everything, he said softly. Nayeli met his eyes, her expression calm and warm. Take care on your travels, and remember the mountains are beautiful, but they must be respected. I will, he promised. They stood in the quiet snow for one final moment. Then Nayeli stepped back, and Daniel climbed into his jeep. He rolled down the window. I won't forget this, he said. You shouldn't, she replied gently. Some experiences stay with us forever. He nodded, started the engine, and slowly drove away. As he looked in the rearview mirror, he saw her standing peacefully in the snow, watching him leave strong, calm, and connected to the mountains around her. On the drive home, Daniel realized something powerful. He hadn't only survived a storm, He had gained a new understanding of nature, of resilience, and of unexpected human kindness. And weeks later, when he completed his photography project, every image he captured felt different, fuller, deeper, touched by the memory of the woman who had saved his life and the mountains that had brought them together for one unforgettable night.